we have to be willing to disrupt everything we do in this moment, because the sad part of the story is we are all Blockbuster video today. We all have to figure out how we reinvent ourselves the way Netflix did, or we will become obsolete, and not obsolete to our competitors, obsolete to some upstart that we don't even know exists right now.
Technology has transformed how we live, work, and connect. And behind that change are visionary people with bold ideas. Welcome to the Bridgecast, where host Scott Kinka explores hybrid work, AI, and our evolving future with tech's brightest minds. Presented by Bridgepointe Technologies, the nation's leading tech advisory firm. Experience a better way. The Bridgepointe way.
Hi, and welcome to the Bridgecast. We're thrilled you're with us today. I'm joined by Joel Neeb. He's the Chief Transformation and Business Operations Officer at 8x8. For those of you who don't know, 8x8 is a global leader in cloud communications and contact center solutions. I'm sure we'll hear more about that from Joel. Joel is a former U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and F-15 mission commander. He brings over a decade of leadership experience from companies like VMware and Afterburner to his current role. He's an outspoken cancer survivor and author of Survivor's Obligation. We'll hear a bit about that. I think most importantly, Joel's a motivator and a change agent who has shaken up some of the largest tech companies in the world, and I am fired up for this discussion. Joel, welcome to the Bridgecast.
Thanks, Scott. That's a great intro. Appreciate that.
I was going to say, how'd I do?
That was fantastic. You nailed them all.
Well, before I get started, I'd like to just start by saying, on behalf of the entire Bridgecast community, thank you for your service.
My privilege.
Amazing. So Joel, you've navigated some high stakes environments, flying F-15s, negotiating transformation with C-suites. I'm not sure which one's more dangerous. But before we get into all that, just tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from? Family, give us the deets.
Yeah. So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, go Packers, and moved to Texas for middle school, and then south of Seattle for high school. Went on to the Air Force Academy for college, and graduated from the Air Force Academy, and then I've lived all over the world through my military travels.
How long were you in the military?
15 years.
Wow. Amazing. I've seen in some of your socials and other people's commentary the nickname Thor. You have to give me some context.
All right. So it's a call sign, right? Like if you remember Top Gun, Maverick, and Goose kind of thing. Every call sign story has two versions of the story. One is what you tell everybody, and the other one's really embarrassing for that person. So it has to kind of sound cool, but the safe for public consumption story is that I was the hammer as an instructor, and because I was an early instructor pilot, and so that's the kind of the boring, dumb story that say, okay, hammer Thor. And then the real version of the story, which is embarrassing, because there's always got to be something that embarrasses you if people knew it, is that on my certification ride, which allows me to become a flight lead, I'm no longer just the wingman. If you remember, you can be my wingman anytime in Top Gun. You move from the wingman to the flight lead. During that particular mission, I was flying with my squadron commander, and I was leading us back. Everything went great, and I made the very dumb decision to take us through a thunderstorm that happened to be between us and the base on the way home. The good news is I wasn't struck by lightning. The bad news is he was. So my squadron commander's plane got struck by lightning in the process. And so Thor, god of thunder.
Making you the god of thunder. I get it.
Exactly. Okay. In a bad way. Yeah.
Amazing story. Walk me from military into tech then. Like how'd that transition happen? How'd you land there?
So I flew 3,000 missions as a fighter pilot and instructor pilot in the United States Air Force. I loved every single moment of it. I just smile on my face behind the mask on every flight. But while I enjoyed that, my passion wasn't for flying. Meaning, when I hung up the flight suit, I fly like once a year now, and not very often. I did everything I wanted to do in an airplane, but it did ignite a different passion for me, and that was around transformations. And it did that at a very early point in my career. At 22 years old, when I graduated from the Air Force Academy, I was thrust into flight school, where in a very short period of time, they took 30 of us in a class and went from driving a car one day to flying upside down faster than the speed of sound, 3 feet away from 7 other airplanes in a formation within about 4 months. And it took us to the top 0.5% of pilots in the world in terms of skill level in that short period of time. And as I was exiting that program, literally 4 months, you learn how to do all these things by yourself. You learn fighter pilot stuff afterwards in terms of like how to deploy from a tactical perspective and missiles and all the sorts of things that you'd have to deploy from a combat perspective. But just in terms of pure flying skills, 4 months, I became one of the top 0.5% of pilots in the world. And I said, holy cow, if I could bottle what I just went through in terms of that personal transformation and that team transformation and just let that loose on everything else I did in life, we could accomplish anything. And so I made a little mental note that I wanted to be a part of that for the rest of my life.
So what's the early lesson in your career that has shaped how you're leading today then?
I think the earliest lesson that I had that shapes how I lead today is that you need to begin before you feel ready. And so, you start with 0 flights and having never had any flying experience whatsoever. And then you're flying by yourself at some point, you're soloing the airplane, right? And so my question to you would be, after how many missions do you think you would be comfortable no longer having an instructor sitting in the plane with you and you're taking off and landing and going 400 miles an hour and doing a loop somewhere and all those things? How many missions would it take before you'd feel comfortable doing that by yourself?
Wow, I couldn't tell you. 25, 30, 40. Who knows?
And the answer is 7. That's all we give our students. Yeah. So the 7th mission that you get to in the Air Force is by yourself. The first half is flown with your instructor in it. You land, and after you land, the instructor gets out. You leave one engine running. That person gets out of the plane and basically says, "Good luck." And I'll never forget on my particular solo, he got out. I had done a couple landings just to prove that I wouldn't kill myself when I went up there. And as he's walking away, I reached out and he's climbing down the ladder and I grabbed his flight suit by the shoulder. And I said over the roar of the engines, "Hey, I don't feel like I'm ready for this," because I'm about to go solo by myself. And he goes, "I know you don't, but you are." And he wrenched his shoulder out of my grip. And I could still picture him walking away to this day. And now I'm alone by the airplane all by myself. And I took it off and flew it. And the secret was he was right. He had done the things to make sure that I was ready. I didn't feel ready in that moment. And probably the best lesson I could have had at 22 years old is that you need to do things before you feel ready. You need to do the stuff to mitigate the risk. But all too often we get caught waiting until the perfect opportunity and we get stuck in waiting for perfection before we can actually start moving.
Wow. Can you give me another example of how kind of the military precision, I guess maybe that's the best word, translates into business operations as you think about them today?
So as you think, if someone were to say, all right, so what did those 4 months look like as you think about, the 4 months from driving a car one day to top 0.5%? If you look at each day, we're not flying on the weekends, right? We're only flying during the week. So it's not very many business days to do this. And what takes place is very simple. Every single day, we brief the mission that we're going to fly. We fly it. We come back and we debrief it with a very strong focus on root cause analysis, what went well, what didn't go well. And then you never leave a debrief without 3 things you can do better on the next one. And not just, here's a list of 3 things that you might think about doing better. Here's the 3 very focused things that you can do right now that are your key bottlenecks for success, whereby if you did them tomorrow would be the most significant advances that you could make. And with an instructor, of course, you're doing all these things. And by doing it that way, every single day, we would come up with 3 things to improve on the next flight. And on the first flight, of course, there's 100 things. You could improve 1,000 things that they could have come up with. But they said, here's the 3 things to focus on tomorrow. And what you do is you chip away and you start building that knowledge base and skill base over time so that those 3 things allow you to advance along that path. It's incredibly uncomfortable. You can't revert. You can't you can't unlearn the skills from last week. You have to keep building on them. And so another key aspect of it that we do is something called chair flying. This is something that hasn't hit the business world yet, but if it did, it would change everything. Chair flying is the following. You only get about 60 missions in those 4 months, 60 times you go up in the air, 60 takeoff, 60 landings. And so that's a limited number of times to really improve along this path. We visualized our missions at night. So when I would go home, I'd literally stick a plunger on the floor and I would close my eyes and hold the plunger like it was a stick in the cockpit. And I would visualize the entire sortie. I'd visualize every action I was going to take. And that mere act of visualizing success and all the steps that I needed to undertake to be successful was a determining factor in my success the next day. And if you went through a fighter squadron right now that was training new pilots, the number one thing you would hear from instructors is, did you chair fly last night? Or you didn't chair fly last night, did you? Because it was that big. It was more important than anything else we could do, visualizing your execution in such a way that you were programming your brain and basically getting additional flights when you didn't have them.
Is that, at the risk of going off on a complete tangent, or maybe we reserve this for later, but, brief, execute, debrief feels a lot like, kind of agile methodology. I've seen you speak a bit about that. Is that why you lean in on agile? You're just kind of used to that?
Very much so. And it was codified with something called the OODA loop: observe, orient, direct, and act, by a fighter pilot in the 70s. And that went out to the business world. So you might even hear OODA loop in the business world. It's the exact same concept of iterating every single day for success. The Agile and Scrum was created by a former fighter pilot, Dr. Sutherland created it. And so a lot of these core themes come from that harsh, no room for mistakes environment, whereby you're eliminating mistakes as methodically as possible on every single flight.
I'm sure there are a lot of Scrum Masters who are nodding their heads right now, so I get it. A little bit more demographically on you, and then we'll jump into just sort of a little bit more about your business philosophy and what you're doing today. But you've spoken and written extensively about being a cancer survivor, and you probably get asked this question a lot. But how has that shaped the way that you lead?
It's clearly the crossroads of my life in terms of put me on an entirely different path. And the reason it did is because in 2010, I was told I had stage 4 cancer. I effectively had about 18 months to live. They gave me a 15% chance to live 5 years. So they always, talk in terms of 5-year survival rates. And even if I lived to 5 years in a day, that was going to be a really crummy 5 years in a day moment. Like it was going to be a long slide downhill. And what it forced me to do is take stock of my life, just like anybody would in that moment. And I said, here's what I'm proud of. Here's what I wish I would have done differently. Here's what I would do if I had another chance, just like everyone does, I think, in those dark moments. And what I said is, well, I love being a fighter pilot. It's a chapter of my life. I wish it wasn't the whole book, right? If I died at 33, it would have been the entire story. And I said, if I got another chance, I would do things differently, and I would go out in the business world and I'd try my hand at all these other things, which really wasn't the path I was on. I was just going to go to 20 years and retire and probably go to the airlines. But this forced me to look at life differently in that moment. And then God called my bluff and I got a second chance. And I was like, well, I guess I got to take this. And I did the unthinkable. I got out of the military at 15 years when I was 5 years away from a guaranteed retirement pay that we thought was a lot of money at that time. And I decided to forego that. And I became the dumbest guy in the room in MBA school, and went on my learning path to join the business world.
Got it. And eventually a few twists and turns in there, but you landed at VMware, which is a company that obviously many of our listeners, have intimate knowledge of, maybe a little bit of frustration right now, to be honest with you. Tell me about that. What'd you get bring in to do? What'd you accomplish there? Like, we don't need to dwell there, but I'm just curious, like, what you were focused on when you were at VMware.
Yeah. So prior to VMware, I joined a consultancy called Afterburner. And our entire role was to lead on corporate initiatives, help to plan the corporate initiative, help to lead the execution of it. So a little different than a typical like McKinsey consultancy where you're going to get a big binder of strategy that they walk away with and they say, here you go, good luck. We were there to like lead them through the execution and actually take them to the goal line. And so at VMware, we had I worked as a consultant there for many years, and we kept building on these tactical successes to the point where we're the top consultancy for the whole company, working out of the office of the CEO. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with Pat Gelsinger, and he's a close friend of mine now, and we text every week. But that was all born from that time period. And then he said, all right, you're getting too expensive. Come inside of a VMware and work in the office of the CEO at that point and lead some of these same transformations.
Got it. So that's, jumping forward to today, we'll jump to 8x8. I mean, I think our listeners are obviously familiar with 8x8 as a, decades long category leader in UC. But when someone has transformation in their title, there's a very specific purpose, right? I mean, what's the purpose? What are you tasked with transforming there?
Yeah, so I think we have a lot of the same challenges that most companies did, and we certainly had at VMware. So at VMware, when I joined and I had transformation in my title there as well, working in the office of the CEO, there it was around transforming our operating model from selling ELAs and products to selling outcomes that happen to include our products and going to much more of a consumption model and into more of a SaaS-based model. And at first glance, that just might sound like, well, let's just SaaSify our contracts and change some words in there so that they're now buying consumption. But of course, if you really understand what that shift means, you've now moved the goal line for your company from selling on hype and what might have inevitably become shelfware, but you still get paid for it, to now selling on the outcome. And if you're selling on consumption, now own that territory after the sale to ensure that they actually derive the outcome from it. The analogy I always use is, we were selling treadmills for a long time and we're selling them on the features and it had 15-degree incline and, isn't this go fast and isn't this screen nice, to then saying, we're going to help you win a marathon. And that includes a treadmill, but you got a trainer and you're going to have to get up at 5 a.m. And here's all the things that'll change in your life because of that. That's the transformation I was leading there. And it's actually the same transformation I'm leading at 8x8.
All of that I get. What's the 8x8 path? Where's this specific... what's next, I guess, is really the question. I mean, like I said, I pose it as a decades-long, leadership position in UC, and I don't think anybody's questioning that. What's next, I guess, really in that path?
There's never been a better time to work with or for 8x8. For 25 years, we have been the leader in communication plumbing in a single integrated platform. And so our value proposition was, we're going to come to you and we're going to connect all your team members internally with UC. We're going to give them a contact center capability so that you can reach your customers that way. We have a chat tool. We have video teleconferencing tools, and it's all in one simple, single integrated platform. And you might be able to find maybe some point solutions out of those categories that maybe have some features that you like better here or there, but it's not the single integrated platform. And particularly for a mid-market size company who's got a small IT team and they don't want to deploy 7 different products and manage 7 different platforms, this sounds great to them. And so they love that. And so for 25 years, that was entire value proposition. What we're shifting from is not just being your communications plumbing, but your communications intelligence platform. Because now when you couple not just the simplicity of that integrated platform, but the AI-ready communications data in one single platform across your entire company, whether that's to your customers or internally, through chat messages, through phone calls, all those bits and bytes of communication are now inputs from which we extract incredible AI-driven insights in this next era.
And obviously, I get that from my chair. I'm done. I've been in this for a long time. But if you're an IT leader who's listening to this right now, you're going, all right, I get all that. What does that mean? Can you contextualize that for us? Like, put it in the business use case. Maybe the last customer you talked to, or something like that about this. Make the technology real. Tie it to something.
So we're customer zero, and that's very important for us that we're leveraging this first. And so I'll just tell you some examples internally how we're using this. So we changed our culture in January of last year, and we said, from this point forward, we're going to record all of our calls. We're going to record all of our video conferences, much like we're recording this podcast right now. All of that's going to be captured. Why? Because without the inputs, you don't get the insights. And in this case, the inputs come from communication. And so when you think about what that looks like for us today, here we are a year into our journey of recording all these things. We have all of this vast, rich information for all the communication that's taken place across the company. I'll tell you some ways I used it today. I had a couple meetings today, and I said, create a follow-up email with a single click of a button that looks at my meeting transcript, extracts an email in exactly the way that I've taught it to do it over and over again in a single platform. It creates that message with the 3 things I care about. I wanted to summarize the meeting. I wanted to talk about what the next steps are for all of us in the meeting, what we've committed to, and then when we're meeting again. And I've created a template. You can create whatever you want, but that's the template that I've programmed into the tool. It creates that email for me in a second, and it sends it off for me as well. Another example is you get off a customer call. Maybe you want to send an email to that customer and do the same thing, and you're able to do it in a different format. Here's what you said your business problems were. Here's how we can support you at 8x8. Here's what next steps would look like. Can't wait to talk to you on X date, and it'll send that email off to them right away. Or maybe you want to create a Salesforce update, which everyone in the sales team dreads doing because you got to go open up Salesforce, scratch your head, and remember what the call was about, and what do I want to put in my notes. We have an automated way for AI to extract that Salesforce update and for you to be able to push that into your Salesforce instance in that moment.
Got it. No, really good examples. I mean, it's so funny right now because we're in so many conversations with IT leaders who are, you know, I've been told to go get some AI. I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to go get some. A friend of mine always says, "Can I buy that by the pound?" If
Yeah.
that's the case, what, are customers coming to you for that? Are IT leaders coming to you for that? That's number
All the
one.
time.
And I think, what's that? I'm sorry.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, who owns that? I think one of the challenges that I see a lot of times is that, we're at this intersection of sort of the infrastructure and plumbing to run a business and then the line of business. And the success of a line of business app or initiative usually doesn't, I mean, IT usually doesn't feel like they own that. They probably should, but like, oh no, that's in the department. I gave them the thing. They got to do something with the thing. You know what I mean? Does AI become a nexus for effort? We're trying to solve that. And like, advice maybe for IT leaders who are tasked with comms, but ultimately are being led into the kind of conversation that you're having about leveraging the communications. How can they push that back into the organization?
I'll first tell you how not to do AI, and it's really the way most are right now. They're using it as a bit of a parlor trick. And it reminds me a lot of the early internet days. You probably remember this too in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And you go to a fresh internet page and it would be one where it would have like a counter on it. Let's say it's Sears.com, who did a terrible job, getting on the internet. Obviously, they don't exist anymore. And on Sears.com, it says, "You are visitor 10,100 to our website." And it clicked over while you were watching it. And it turned your mouse cursor into a dancing banana and it played some MIDI music, right? And for you and me in that moment, we'd never seen anything like that before. And we're like, oh, it's kind of cool. It kind of took over my computer from far away. That's neat, right? Didn't have any business application. And I never went back to that website. But that's the equivalent of how people are using AI today. They're checking the box on it. And then you went and saw Amazon in 2000 or Google, and you saw really how they were accelerating business outcomes with this technology. And you're like, oh, this is what it can do. It's not just the silly parlor trick. And that's what most people are doing wrong right now. They're checking the box on it. They're doing something that looks neat and interesting in the moment, but really doesn't have any business application for today. So how do we go about it? You have to do three things in my mind in order to be successful with your AI application. And you don't start with AI. It's the last thing you do. One, you want to visualize your current operating procedures. What do your business procedures look like today? Think of the examples I said earlier. I'm sending an email. I'm doing a Salesforce update. That's not sexy and glamorous. That's not that exciting, but it is something I have to do. It's a business procedure that exists already. And I want to visualize all the steps with a customer. I want to visualize it first, and then I want to optimize it. What do I mean by optimize? A lot of our processes have become long and convoluted, and they have all these edge case considerations in them. If we put AI onto an inefficient process, we're just going to become more inefficient faster. We're literally going to pave over the cow path, and we're going to ride our Ferrari over it, and the wheels are going to fall off, right? So we got to optimize those business processes first. And now when we've gone from 40 steps down to 21, we still haven't said the word AI yet. Now and only now am I going to say, what's the bottleneck in this system? What are those things I hate doing that are manual? How much time do they take? And how many times a day do I have to do them? And if I could just automate that one step, what would that do to my process? And how could I shorten the sales cycle by doing that? How could I improve the customer experience or improve the employee experience by that simple automation? And then finally, that's the last piece, automate. So visualize, optimize, automate. In that order is how I recommend you bring AI into the equation.
Got it. And it's really great advice. It's funny. I had some notes scratched down here. You may have just answered it, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. You're a change agent. I mean, you've done it throughout your career. Operational excellence, it's budgeting time for everybody. They're getting asked right now when we're recording this episode about what they're going to spend next year. And they're going to try to go find money to invest in this AI stuff. So like operational excellence has traditionally been about, efficiency and very often cost reduction, right? In a lot of ways, like I'm going to be capital efficient, I'm going to be spend efficient, I'm going to do whatever. I mean, in the examples that you just gave, it's kind of the opposite, right? I mean, in the era of AI, do you see us redefining kind of the way we think about operational excellence as a true source of like a strategic advantage or a way to, propel the business forward? Do our definitions have to change?
I think we have to reinvent what we are as companies. And a lot of companies are looking at AI from exactly what you just said. How can I do cost savings? How can I take a team and make it smaller and just throw some AI on top of it? And that's the wrong approach. And the reason I say it's the wrong approach is because you're not thinking big enough. We have to be willing to disrupt ourselves. What do I mean by that? Why did Netflix win and Blockbuster didn't? Obviously, everybody knows the story about how Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix in like 1999 for $50 million, right?
Yeah.
And when they say that, when people say that, they say, "Oh wow, did they miss their big chance? That would have changed everything." I don't think so. I think Blockbuster would have ran Netflix into the ground. They would have isolated that into some building and never talked to them, and they would have strangled it, and it never would have existed. And somebody else would have done video streaming, and we would be watching that platform. But they had too much inertia, and they weren't willing to disrupt themselves at Blockbuster because they had this cash cow that they're holding onto, a brick and mortar. And then you look at why Netflix really won. It wasn't just because they landed on streaming faster. They actually started as this logistics company that was showing out DVDs in a distribution model, and they ship them to you, right? And I never got on board with that, but I know a lot of people who did, and they were able to see from this distribution model what people liked watching, what they could start to understand, what they would watch if they went to a digital format. They disrupted their entire company, their culture, their operating model, their technology, and said, we're going to become Netflix, the streaming model. Then when Hulu and Disney Plus and all these other folks came in there and said, we're carving up your giant library, because if you remember, Netflix used to have Star Wars on it and every movie you could ever think of, you go on Netflix and you just find it on the streaming service. And of course, the production companies would say, well, we'll take that. We can do the same thing you're doing. I'll make Disney Plus. I'll make HBO Max. And they disrupt themselves again and became a Hollywood production studio. And then Stranger Things just released again last week, and everybody's going gaga over it because they disrupted themselves. Long story short, there's a really long way to answer your question, but we have to be willing to disrupt everything we do in this moment, because the sad part of the story is we are all Blockbuster Video today. We all have to figure out how we reinvent ourselves the way Netflix did, or we will become obsolete, and not obsolete to our competitors, obsolete to some upstart that we don't even know exists right now.
Totally. I mean, it's great advice. Now I'm the IT guy who's listening to this thing, perhaps, maybe not the business leader, and going, all right, well, that's the job of the rest of the C-suite. I'm keeping the lights on. Like, give me some advice for how IT leaders can make themselves useful in that business transformation. Do they use AI as the wedge to do that?
So I don't know if they necessarily use AI, the technology. I think they use AI as the burning platform, meaning if it's not us, somebody else is going to do this and disrupt us for us. And so what I would say a CIO should focus on in this moment is thinking about how do we build the tools that we would have gotten off the shelf internally today? How do we create with AI coding the same things I would have bought off the shelf in an easier way with AI, and make it a more customized tool that I would never even have found on the shelf in some other places? We do this internally. We had the opportunity to go buy a sales simulator, right? It practice selling, and you talk to an AI bot that acts like a customer, and it exists, and you can go buy it off the shelf. It's like $200K. But instead of doing that, what we ended up doing is we trained our own model, and we used our own customer transcripts. Because remember, we're already recording everything. We got the inputs. Only when you have the inputs do you get the insights. So we used our own transcripts, and we created a customer simulator that's not just generic, spin selling or challenger sale training or medic, whatever methodology you use. It's actually the objections that have been brought up in our previous calls. It's actually the winning techniques that we're teaching our team to use, and they'll win or lose in our simulator that we built in-house, based off of those previous transcripts. And it cost us pennies compared to what they wanted for it on the market.
It's a great use case. We talked a little bit earlier about Agile and kind of how that filters into your business philosophy. And I was just mentioning budget a couple minutes ago. Like, everybody's in this balanced budget, performance, and innovation, right? At the same time. Some advice there, given your background, for IT leaders who are, particularly now, given, we're in budget season.
Yeah. And typically in budget season, what we're usually pursuing is evolutionary change. What are the stepwise changes I could make to teams that already exist to make them more effective? How can I optimize them? Where can I shift things around on the table a little bit to optimize our existing system? And I would say it's not the moment for evolutionary change. It's the moment for revolutionary change. What does that mean? if AI is as disruptive as we think it is, and it clearly is, what would we be in 3 years? What is the company that we want to grow into and work backwards from that? Don't just look at the previous year and change a couple of decimal places on your budget and think that you've done your job. You need to start thinking outside the box and say, if I'm extrapolating, this is my Netflix moment and I have to reinvent myself, what does that look like in 3 years? And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while to change your culture, your operating model, the tools you're using internally. But if we were to be successful with that, what would that look like? And then and only then start backing into, now what does that imply that I need to do this year to start moving in that direction?
Got it. So apply it to yourself. What does 8x8 look like in 3 years?
8x8 looks like an incredibly exciting company in 3 years where we have the single platform that is not just selling simplicity in an integrated platform. We're giving you every insight you could ever ask for your company. Think of a tool where you can go into it and say, what's the sentiment of my organization look like today across the team? By the way, we can do that right now. And hear that this functional group is talking about this challenge they had in product last night, and they were up all night working on this new thing and they're frustrated. The sales team is pitching these products. They're not talking about these things. The operational team is working on these two initiatives. Oh, by the way, they're not talking about the third one right now that we said was an important one for us as a company. That's at the executive level. Think about being a frontline sales manager and you're able to go in and see how your team is pitching to customers, how you can give them performance feedback, not that you have to come up with on your own, but you can leverage AI to customize that feedback and give them feedback to make it better, just like a fighter pilot does the 3 things a little bit better each day. By the way, we're doing that already right now as well. These are all the things that we're going to offer the market in 3 years and help to do performance management, their own transformation, better serve their customers, and do it not from what we think the customer wants or what somebody heard in a call 3 months ago, but from the actual communication itself. In other words, today, I can go to all of our customer conversations, and we do this. We say, what are 10 product features that we should start working on based off of this week's customer conversations? And it'll rank order them and say, here's the things they're talking about. Here's what they wish they had. Then we can say, well, customers don't really know what they need. They know what they want. They don't necessarily know what they need. What do those new features imply? What's the problem to solve that they're really asking for? And what would be a more intelligent way to actually go about solving that problem for them? Instead of just giving them the feature they're asking for, what's the problem to solve and how can we start brainstorming around what that looks like? We're thinking at like so many levels beyond what companies are capable today when you apply some of this behind the scenes.
Yeah, in so many ways you think about the spoken conversations that are going on inside the business as unstructured data that you don't have access to today, or at least not, not in a way that's consumable. And like it's a snap a finger and it's available for analysis. It's available to ask questions. I mean, who needs a customer survey when you're having conversations with customers every day, right? At the end of the day. No, that makes a lot of sense. We're in the lightning round though. Joel, this has been awesome, by the way. I really appreciate your time. Let me hit you with a couple quick ones. All right. I need a shameless prediction. It doesn't need to be about 8x8. It can be about tech. It could be about sports. It doesn't matter. Give me something next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, in the next 12 to 18 months, everyone is going to begin recording all of their communications, not just companies like 8x8. You're going to see that in mass. You're already starting to see some lapel pins that people are wearing around to record it. Just keep an eye out. You're going to start seeing that, particularly at tech summits. Already, I've seen a couple. You're going to see everyone doing that because they're all going to be going in that direction. No inputs, no insights. They're going to start getting the inputs.
Okay, super cool. Give me a contrarian opinion, something in AI, CX, future of work, whatever, that you hold that maybe you think people might roll their eyebrows out, and then give us a quick defense of it.
A contrarian opinion would be, so I think a contrarian opinion is that AI is going to steal a lot of jobs. I'll give you the contrarian approach to it. So AI is going to take a lot of jobs from us. I would say that everyone's job will be disrupted by AI. If you're doing the same thing in 2 years that you're doing today, you will be fired or your job will be obsolete and your company will be obsolete at that point. So our job in this new universe we just entered with AI is to keep moving as quickly as possible into the next direction. Change is inevitable in this era. So the amount of time you spend at each place and doing the same thing over and over again is going to be your limiting factor. And that's really scary. And that's for a lot of folks, that's daunting. But here's the good news. If you can stay 2 to 3 months ahead of the rate of change right now, you look brilliant. If you're 3 months ahead of the curve 10 years ago, who cares? You knew something that's coming out in a magazine in 3 months. What do you do? You're 3 months ahead of what people are doing with AI today. You look like a savant and you're crushing your competition. And that's literally the advantage that you win with.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. All right, two more. What are you reading right now? What's on the nightstand?
I'm reading a lot of books. One is on Teddy Roosevelt. I'm reading a biography. I try to do that as much as possible and learn about the successful people of the past that I want to be more like. I'm reading The Power of Prediction, which is an AI book as well. And what I typically do for reading, just to give you an idea of how I consume books at this point, is that I will upload sections of it to ChatGPT or some other AI tool, and I'll have it read it to me while I'm at the gym and working out. And then, and this is the important part, I'll pause it and I'll say like, hey, wait a second, I don't understand that part. Explain that to me in simpler details. And it's like having a conversation with the author at that point. It'll break it down to me because my fighter pilot mind doesn't understand all these tech things all the time. So I need to have it explained to me in a little simpler terms. And so I'll do that, or I'll say, that sounds great. How would that apply to us at 8x8? And then it shifts the focus from this generic story in the book to how we should apply it at 8x8. And it's completely changed how I consume reading.
Oh, wow. That's a hot take right there. I mean, I really enjoy that. If you had to sum up your business philosophy in a single sentence, what would it be?
My business philosophy is that there's no better feeling than growing with an elite team and serving an elite mission. Whether that is the mission in the Air Force that I had to protect the America's freedom, or whether that mission is to better serve our customers at 8x8 or the elite team of my family and my wife and I raising our kids, the best moments in life are on elite teams serving an inspiring mission. And so the more you can do that in life and business, the happier you are. Life is not about creating a resume. It's about who you become along the way. And that's the type of person I want to always be.
Wow. I almost wished I asked this next question before that one, because that was so profound. I probably should just stop there, but I have to ask you this question because we ask it on every episode. You can pick whichever dystopian future you think may happen, but it has occurred and only one app is still working on your mobile device. You get to choose which one and why.
One app. Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, the obvious answer at this point is Claude. At this stage, it's going to be the AI tool. That's a super boring answer. We'll reverse this in the recording. We'll end with the other one. And I'm joking, but yeah. That's it.
No, I get it. It makes perfect sense. I mean, I guess assuming that the AI is still up and it still has access to all the information it does right now, why would you need any other app?
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, it's a more profound answer than maybe you thought it was when it first came out of your mouth. Joel, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. It's been insightful. You're super interesting to talk to. I hope we have the opportunity to do it again.
Me too. I really enjoyed this. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, you got it. Joel, if listeners want to dive a little bit deeper into your work at 8x8, learn a little bit more about you, follow you, what would you recommend they do?
Yeah, I'm all over LinkedIn. I post all the time. I answer every message that I get there. So go follow me there first. Comment on our stuff. I'll start dialogues in the comments and then I'll also message you directly there as well.
Amazing, Joel. Thank you. And let me thank you one more time for your service and for your time on this podcast. Appreciate that. Joel Neeb, everybody. Thanks. And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bridgecast. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, hit subscribe, leave us a review, share it with your team. We hope to see you on a future episode. Thanks so much. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepointe Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepointe, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointetechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepointe, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.